Hey everybody, how's it going? I've got Keith Mandoske here with us today from LVJ Motorsports. If you're not aware of Keith, you're definitely aware of the name of his company. They're very strong supporters of the Raptor community. I know ever since I've been investigating getting a Raptor, I've seen his company branded somewhere along the way. Keith is a Navy veteran, which of course we're very proud to support here at Bushmaster Productions. And in the Navy, he was a diesel mechanic. He brought Marines back and forth from ship to shore on landing crafts. His full-time job is he's an engineer. He designs communication sites for cellular communications and broadcasters. He's traveled all over the country, all 50 states and all the territories except Puerto Rico. Maybe we'll have to fix that. See if we can get a run in Puerto Rico. That'll be fun. All right. He's had a Raptor since 2012. It was a 2013 Gen 1. And he's been all across the nation with it. In 2018, he picked up in 2017, he picked up a late 2018. He's organized and led runs in South Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and he's been to dozens of events, including GLRE Snoball, which we are all very familiar with, TRR, Texas Raptor Run, we're also very familiar with that one, Raptoberfest, Havoc in the Hills, Phoenix Offroad Park, Rauch Creek, GLRE, I can never say that right, GLRE Wild West Trips. And he's been a lead support driver for Snowball for 8 years. Man, that's incredible. I'm worn out just introducing you. So Keith is with us here today. He's going to answer some questions regarding radios. He's going to give us a general breakdown, tell us how it works. Now, just as a disclaimer, the radios we're talking about are high-powered radios. They're not like walkie-talkies that you get at Walmart or Target. They're actual radios, and in order to operate these radios, depending on the frequencies you're operating, obviously, you're going to need a license. So for a lot of what we're talking about, it's going to be ham license. I'm not going to get into all that. Keith is the expert. I'm going to let him do it. So, Keith, hey, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on tonight. LVJ Motorsports, I started it several years ago more as a way to support my off-roading. Everything I do and sell is to help the people in the off-road community get more involved in what we do. So let's jump right into it. I've got 33 slides here, and I'll try to crank through them as quick as I can to keep you all entertained. So just brief summary here. A lot of people know this already, but there's three types of radios. The first one is a handheld, different wattages and strengths, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then what I call the single unit, it's where the radio is the entire unit itself. And then there's a remote face radio. This is where you put the radio body under the seat up against the back cab wall. And then the head unit or the faceplate goes in an obvious place, and you don't have to have the entire radio visible. Just a brief overview, there's VHF, UHF, and CB. Whoops, I got a typo, I gotta fix that. VHF is very high frequency, UHF ultra high frequency, and CB is citizens band. A lot of the Jeep guys use CBs. And a lot of people confuse that. They think anytime you pick up a microphone, you're talking on a CB radio. But in reality, what the Raptor community has chosen is VHF radio. The difference between VHF and UHF is more land-based, where UHF is more building-based. So if we were in a high-rise building and I wanted to talk from the 4th floor to the 8th floor, a UHF radio would transmit through the building much better. So it's all Googleable. I guess that's the term we use today. You can look that up and get into more detail. I'm going to just keep moving forward. The next question we had was single or dual band. So the radio, the single unit here, is a single band radio. It means you're only talking on one channel or able to use one channel at a time. Here on the right, the ICOM radio, it actually has a left side of the radio and a right side of the radio, and we call that a dual band. I like using it, and a lot of support drivers use it because when you're in groups, you can actually set your channel on the left side to the people you're talking with and responsible for, but the band on the other side you set to the group that's ahead of you or behind you, so that you can listen to their dialogue as well. So if a group ahead of me says they've got an off, or they've stopped for a bio break or whatever, I know that when I'm coming down the trail, I'm not going to come upon a group of Raptors in the line. So it's a great option to have, but we can talk more about that if you're interested in that type of radio. All right, jumping ahead here. There's different types of bands. In the matter of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but what they talk about is what licenses are required and the wattage limits and things like that. So one of the things that we can't use is marine radios. A lot of people say, well, can I use a marine radio? Well, the marine radio is licensed just to bodies of water. You're not allowed to use them on the land. And so there are some Jeep communities that have used marine radios because they're easy to obtain. They come pre-programmed, but that's an issue that they have to deal with. So the Raptor community, again, has chosen VHF radios. Let's talk about range of radios. So the chart I was able to find only goes up to 5 watt here in the VHF range. And what they're saying is in open field, it should be 4 to 6 miles. I haven't seen a 5 watt radio go that far. I've seen it go 2 to 3.5 miles, but it really goes to the terrain you're in. If you're in Baja, California, where it's just low scrub, and you're able to go from ridge to ridge, yeah, I could see it going that far. But where I'm at in Michigan and Wisconsin and the Dakotas, we have so much trees and things like that it affects the range. When you get into the higher wattage, oops, I just got a delivery. When you get into the higher wattage, you will see that range increases. It could go to 10, 12 miles. Some places I've read that a 50 or 65 watt radio can go 20 miles. Again, the most I've ever spoken on my radio was 12 miles, and I had Motion X, and I was able to plot where the other person was, and I was able to measure it. And that was across cornfields with some woods in between. So range varies on terrain, depends on the time of year, it depends on atmospheric air pressure, moisture content, all kinds of things. Moving ahead, this is the big one I get all the time. Ham license, is it needed? The 100% legal answer is yes, you need a license to operate this radio. The ham radio test is not very hard. There's 100 places online that you can study for it. You can even take it online now. A lot of places made you come in and sit for the test. With COVID right now, I believe that you can take them remotely. When you go on my website and you look, it says, we highly recommend that prior to using any VHF or UHF radio, you should know and understand the FCC rules and regulations. Compliance with those regulations is solely the responsibility of the purchaser. Just like Ford doesn't tell you to follow the speed limit when you buy one of their vehicles. The truck will go 130 miles an hour, well, if you tune it, but you get what I'm saying. So when it comes to using the radio legally, you should have a license. Handheld options. The radios that I sell are 5 watt and 18 watt radios. The 5 watt Bofang is probably the most common radio in our community. For the price point, they're almost disposable. They have options where you can get extended antennas. You can get a hand mic like this. You can get earpieces to go up under a helmet if you're into ATVing or riding on a sport where you need a helmet. When you Google these, if you start looking for Bofangs and you start Googling them, just watch for the wattage. A lot of times when you price shop around, you may find a 5-watt radio, or you may find a Bofang radio, but it's a 5-watt radio when you expected to get a 10 or 15 or an 18-watt radio. So, but one of the issues with an 18-watt radio, it's a balance between the power and the battery life. I find that a 5-watt radio will last all weekend without charging it. A 18-watt radio, you're lucky to last 6 or 7 hours with it without charging it. So you got to find that balance, or you got to have the charger with you if you want the extra power to be able to transmit. So jumping ahead here. So on the mobile radio, there's several options. You can see I've got it mounted up here on the dash. This is a TYT radio in a Gen 1 truck up in the headliner, and it's got some extra switches. This is a mock-up I've done where I've just put the head unit up here in the dash. This carbon fiber piece can come out. I've seen people put vinyl carbon fiber in here so they don't wreck their real carbon fiber, and then drill a hole through it, and that seems to work real good. This is my truck, the setup I have on my truck. I have it left of the steering wheel. You can see the display really well. The microphone hangs over on the passenger side, and the only holes you have to put in the truck are these 4 holes here on the side of the vent. These are some other radio options. This is a single unit. They've mounted it up here on the dash. Here's another single unit where they put it in the center console, how it hangs in the center console. This is a remote face unit where they put the handheld or the remote face up in the sunglass visor, and another one where they've mounted it to a bracket, probably a Build-Right bracket up on the dash. Here's another one where they've taken a full unit, really cut the dash apart to put that in here. I've seen a lot of people do that. I personally like using that tray for other stuff besides the radio, but some people like that. And then here's another one where they've mounted it in the center console. So those are all good options. Some other options here. This is that same kind of dash or a glove box unit or center console unit, and then another one with a RAM mount up on the dash. Here is one where they mounted it to the right side of the center console, and I'll say that that works good in a screw, where you don't have to slide the seats all the way forward when you've got a passenger in the vehicle. In a scab, it's really a challenge to do that, because if you do get a backseat passenger, the seat will interfere with that, or that interferes with the seat movement. Here's another one where someone has made a carbon fiber. They 3D printed this and they mounted the mic up there. It's an awesome idea. I need to find the person that did that, because I wouldn't mind buying some of those parts from them. I think it's pretty slick. This is Brandon Cull, guy from Colorado. He did this, and when I first saw it, I thought it looked badass, so I kind of came up with a real similar solution. And then lastly is the old standby mobile handheld radio and a cup holder. It works as a first start, and I highly recommend that for a lot of people. Is go with a handheld radio to start with. Figure out what you want after you've gone to an event, and see what other people have done. So, all right, mounting radios. The remote radios under the seat. This is out of my truck also. I've got the radio mounted under the driver's seat. You can see how I mounted it here. One thing you have to watch out for is there's a big ass bundle of wires right here underneath it. If you just drill through the carpet, your seat won't move anymore, or the seat heater won't work, or you'll start a fire. So watch out and know where those wires are. Hearing the radio. So I have my truck hooked up to where the center speaker on the dash is how I play my radio. You have to make sure you unplug it from the truck though. If the stereo in the truck plays back through the speaker in the VHF radio, you will blow that speaker. One way to do it is to add an external speaker. What I've seen people do is down on the center console, down by their ankle, is they buy these little speakers and grills, and they put them in, and that seems to work real good. Programming the radios, or programming frequencies. If you're not afraid of computers, you're not afraid of understanding how the USB connections work and serial ports work and all of that stuff. You can buy the cable and the software specific to your radio, and you can program it, and then probably never use that $100 software and cable again. But I program all the radios. I put in whatever channels that you want me to put in. I put in all of the common GLRE channels, the ones we use at TRR, all of those different types of things. The next one is modifications. This is a problem that I've seen happen where people buy radios from Amazon, or they shop around and buy a used radio, or someone calls me and says, hey, my radio won't transmit. I've hooked it all up. And I ask them did you modify it? Well, radios, to meet the FCC compliance laws, they're sometimes not allowed to transmit on particular frequencies. And the frequencies that the Raptor community have chosen happen to be those specific frequencies. So what you have to do is you have to do a Mars modification to the radio. And that little tiny dot you see right there in my finger is the computer chip that you have to take off this board. You have to know which one it is. And if you get the wrong one, or your heat gun or your soldering iron goes a little too far, you just wrecked a $400 radio. So I've done it several times, obviously, and that's part of the cost of selling the radio. So some tips on where to buy and who to buy from. Obviously, you want to buy from someone you trust and someone that you can call if you have questions. Make sure that you know that the radio was programmed correctly, and that it has the channels that you want. I've seen some people buy radios and they're like, well, they gave me all the Baja channels, but I don't have the GLRE channels. How do I do that? So that's an issue if you're from the Midwest here, right? You buy a radio from a West Coast company and they have no idea who GLRE is. The higher the cost of the radio doesn't necessarily make it better. Further down, I have one that says, you can buy too much radio. I've got people that want a GPS location where you key up your radio and it sends your GPS location to the other person's radio. Well, that's all well and good if you work for a pipeline company or the U.S. Forest Service, where it's important to know where their people are because they are so remote. But it only works if the other person has that in their radio. So for us in our community, I'm not going to look and see where you are or what your radio, where you're located, because you should be in the line behind me. One of the things I always say to people is you won't regret buying a better quality radio over a bargain radio. It is a challenge to spend $400 or $500 for a radio when you can spend $200 for a radio that you're only using 3 or 4 times a year at the most. And there's some people that use the radio once this year, and it'll be 2 or 3 years before they get to another event. So make sure you're balancing what you're buying. But I don't think anybody's ever regretted or said, I wish I would have bought a less expensive radio. Make sure that you don't confuse military specification rugged radio with a company name. I'm sure they're a great company, but a lot of people say, oh, I bought a heavy duty radio. I'm like, no, you didn't. You bought a TYT radio. You bought the least expensive radio that someone sells. So just because it has the name rugged doesn't make it a rugged radio. ICOM, Kenwood, Motorola, those are all the grades of radios that the police, the fire, the military buy. They don't buy TYT or Yasiki or Bofang or any of that stuff. Make sure the radio can transmit on the band you desire. That's what I was talking about with the Mars mod. And Amazon doesn't program or modify radios for you. And like I said, you can buy too much radio. And when you're lost and you don't know and you're just getting started in this, start with a handheld. You'll always have a need for a handheld radio. When you get out of the truck to do a recovery, something along those lines, you're always going to want a handheld radio. When it comes to antenna solutions, I show the GJ Motorsports third brake light here. He has a great option for adding a NMO mount to the top of it. When you don't have an antenna in use, you can put a rain cap on it. It's just a great solution. Obviously, I'm biased to GJ Motorsports because Tom Judge is a good friend of mine, and I help make the wiring harnesses for him. So I have to give credit to a great product. I actually have it on my truck, but I put the antenna on my truck and I drilled it into the roof, and I'll talk about that in a second. So here's a guide to antennas. I know that this is always another big question. And one of the things I don't do is I don't stock antennas or antenna mounts because there's just so many different variations, and the shipping cost to get these antennas from me, or from the supplier to me, and then from me to you, it's always a unique shaped box, and it always costs more, and it's just easier for you to go get it yourself. I have several links on my website for different types of antennas, and that's the best way to get them. The first one is a magnetic mount. This is the most common mount, at least it was on the Gen 1s. Really not too useful on a Gen 2 because of the aluminum truck. But this mount here that you see on the right in this picture, I actually clicked this yesterday afternoon. It's from my buddy Steve's truck. And it's a 3-magnet mount. And this, he has the best range. He's my chase driver at Snowball. And I can probably talk, 5, 8, 10 miles. He can easily talk 15 miles with a 65-watt radio. His radio and antenna combination is second to none. It just works so well. So I never throw shade on a magnet mount. They work real good until it knocks itself off and comes through the back window. So you need to be real careful about where you're using it. This is definitely a case where you want to use a spring mount over a elastomer mount. And I'll talk about that in half a second. The next one is, this is a picture of my truck. You can see I drilled a hole through the roof of my truck, even though I have a third brake light there. I got the one from TJ without the NMO mount. So this mount here goes right through the aluminum of the truck. It actually makes my truck what's called a ground plane, and it makes my truck an addition to the antenna. So I have really good, but the magnet mount also does the same thing. It makes an induction through the magnets into the steel of the truck, and it works just as well. Some other types of mounts that I've seen people use is a clip. It goes on your door. And then the antenna mounts to it. This is a way that you can put it on your vehicle if you've already got an alternate brake light solution. This is a good way to do it. And I'm coming up, excuse me. So there's some pros and cons to these. You guys can read those as I'm going through it. Hopefully I'm not talking through them too quick. The next one is a glass mount. This is another good solution. I actually put a glass mount on my truck initially, and then I went and drilled the hole in the roof. Glass mount works real good if you are just a participant, but it doesn't work real well if you're one of the leaders where you're trying to reach out to other groups. I usually stick it behind on the back window of the truck, and I put it down low so that I can drive in a parking garage or something like that where it's not up too high. The high gain antenna, one of the questions we saw on Facebook was a tall antenna versus a short antenna. The tall antenna is a high gain antenna. And there's a couple of options. There's an elastomer base like you see here, and there's a spring base. The spring base will let the antenna flip all the way over 90 degrees. So if you do hit a very low branch, it'll spring all the way. The elastomer does not allow it to bend that far. And you should always have some sort of spring. I tell people that are in the Midwest and in the East Coast where there's a lot more trees or low-hanging trees than in the Southern California side of things, to always make sure you have a spring. Next is what's called a quarter wave antenna. And I have a quarter wave antenna on my truck right now. It's very short. When I am working just in a with 3 or 4 trucks, or I'm going to just an event where I know it's no more than a mile or two, I run the short antenna, because here in Chicago, I go into a lot of parking garages. I don't want to have to take the antenna off. During Snowball, I have a full high gain antenna that I will screw on. I'll take this short one off and I'll put the taller antenna on. So I have a couple of different antennas in my garage or in my truck even that I'm using. These ones you see on police cars and on fire trucks, these are short antennas. They look like even smaller than a Coke can, like one of those mini Pepsi cans. And these are usually used with repeated systems. I had someone call and say, oh man, I found this cool antenna. And I said, well, that's great if you want to talk to a guy 3 or 4 blocks away. But it's not going to work too well in the forests. So you need a repeated system to do that. Most municipal systems have repeaters on. The other one that I have, and actually this is the antenna I have on my truck right now. It's a quarter wave antenna, and it's actually, you can tie it in a knot. It's basically a thin piece of wire and a piece of plastic, and it works really, really good. But it's just for local use. I wouldn't use it on a long run. When I go out west, I put the tall antenna on. But the tall antennas, as most of you know who've done this, it makes a lot of noise when you're driving. So sometimes I'll put this one on, sometimes I'll put the other one on. These are just some other antenna options. These are little angle clips. This guy drilled it through the cab of his truck. All viable options. Like I said, there's just 100 different ways you can mount these antennas on your vehicles. Some of the other things that I do, I'm pretty much wrapped up with the antennas, is I make custom relay panels. I make custom wiring harnesses. I make the wiring harness for the GJ third brake light. Apollo Optics has me making some reverse harnesses for them. Those are harnesses where when you put the vehicle in reverse, those Baja lights or whatever lights you've put on your bumper will come on, but you can also turn them on with an aux light. I like to call them fuck you lights, but you know what I mean. Some of the things that I also do is if you bought a GJ third brake light as a basic and you want to go to a flasher, I have a kit that you can upgrade it to make it flashing. If you have other lights on your vehicle that you want to do flashing, I have some options for that. I also do custom wiring solutions. This is one of the sketches I do. I map everything out, make sure that the customer knows and understands what each switch is going to do and what it's going to function. And it gives me a map and it makes me understand, lays out what I'm going to be working on. And then that's basically it. Done with the presentation. I've got a few questions to answer here in the next one, but if anybody ever needs me, I usually answer my phone 7 days a week between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central Time. If I miss a call from you, just send me a text. I don't really check my messages. If you call me during the work week and I tell you I'm tied up and busy, it means my day job is calling. So just let me know and we'll get back in touch with you. And then I have some questions from the website that I'll go through and answer real quick. James, did you have anything you wanted to ask me before I moved on there?
Well, we've got Dave and Eric on, and I know Eric had quite a few questions for you as well. So if either one of you guys want to.
Eric, I've got your written questions here, so I'll answer those real quick for you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
The taller the antenna, the better. It helps with your receive quality. It doesn't necessarily help with your transmit, but it does help you receive. The other thing that helps you receive better is opening your squelch up. A lot of times when you start hearing a broken static, a lot of people will turn their squelch down. But if you know someone's far from you and you're trying to hear them, opening your squelch up to where it's just on the edge of making static for you is a good way to hear them better. Can I hook up the handhelds to an external antenna? Yes, you can. There are Bofang and some of the other guys sell extension kits, and you can clip your antenna to a suction cup and put it on the outside of the truck. Well, it will not increase your transmission. It only increases your reception. The 5 watts is 5 watts. What I do tell people who use handheld is don't leave it down in your lap and talk into it. Hold it up by your face. Hold it up so that the antenna is vertical, and make sure that it's above the metal of the vehicle, and you'll get your best transmission quality that way. I will program other people's radios, but if I don't have the cable and the software, I can't charge you $50 to buy $150 worth of software and cable. So I deal with that on a case-by-case basis. There are higher power radios than the 65 and 50 watt radios that most of us sell. Kenwood has a 110 watt radio that is, you can buy them used for $800. They probably came out of a trophy truck. But most of those radios are $1,500 to $2,000, and they're enormous. They're probably 3 times the size of a regular radio. And I don't think that in places other than Baja California, you really need them. And in most of the races that they do out there, they have relay stations. So a lot of those racers know that their life depends on their radio. So the extra $1,000 is well worth it to them, to make sure that no matter which way the vehicle's facing on its roof or whatever, that it's still working. So, but there is that option. I don't sell it, one, because I just don't have a need for it in our Raptor community. I'm not into selling the trophy trucks. PCI does a great job doing that, and it's just not a market that I'm interested in trying to compete in. How are mobile radios typically powered? You should always go direct to the battery to avoid any interference issues. You don't want to just go find a key on power and tap into it. The longer you transmit with the mic, the hotter the radio gets. If you actually were to sit there and watch your radio and key up, even if it didn't talk, and you key up, the fan will all of a sudden come on. It's all the power is being used when you transmit. So you may run into interference issues. I've seen people how they run their antenna cable could interfere with something. So it's weird. Let's just put it that way. There's no easier way to say it. So if you run into interference, you want to try to move your antenna cable a different direction. I've seen people kink their antenna cable, and that causes interference where the truck electronics have access to it.
Hey, Keith, really quick. Speaking of antenna placement and interference, I just recently witnessed a antenna that was mounted on the hood.
Yep.
On a mount that would be a lot like a pillar mount for a light.
Okay.
And whenever they keyed out on the radio, they were triggering every sensor in the truck. It was a Gen 2. And like the truck just went nuts. It lit up like a Christmas tree, and blind spot was going off, everything, because of the power coming off of that antenna.
I will bet you anything it wasn't the antenna transmitting. It was the way he had the cable wrapped under the dash. He probably had the antenna cable, because remember, these cables are 12 feet and 17 feet long. He probably had all that cable wrapped up in a bundle under the dash. So that would be my speculation.
Okay, that makes sense.
If I had to guess. So by moving it to the back of his vehicle, he pulled that cable out from under the dash. So if you are going to do something like that, getting a shielded cable helps, but also knowing and understanding where you wrap that cable is important. The one that's a little outside of the radio connection point was putting connections on the aux plugs. And although I understand the necessity for doing it, to where today you want to have switch 2 turn on your 30-inch bar, and maybe next month you want to rearrange it so it's easier to unplug it. But every time you make a connection in a vehicle, especially a temporary connection, which is what a plug is, you run into a place where moisture can get in, and it's just another failure point. Like when I have to troubleshoot a system, the first thing I look at is what? It's connections. Why do I look at connections first? Because they're the most obvious failure point. So the first thing I do is I look for mechanical connections where it's a plug. The next thing I do is I look for where wire was spliced together. And I look to see if one of those connections came undone. So I think that as much time as it takes for you to cut a wire and put the pins on the side of the wire for the new wire, you can cut the wire and splice it together with a butt connector, and then put some heat shrink on it. That's the best way to make a connection. There are times where temporary things are necessary. I've seen on trophy trucks where a cooling fan is got a plug on it because they have extra fans, and when the fan goes out on a race, you want to just be able to undo the 4 screws, pull the fan out, and plug it in without having to pull out the heat shrink gun and blah, 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 and all that stuff. So, but again, for what we're doing, it's not necessary, but it is your preference. That's just my opinion. And I think, Dave, you had some questions, but I didn't get a chance to copy them into the presentation. Do you want to read them to me, or do you want me to go back and look at the link?
You pretty much answered any questions I had already.
Okay.
One thing I was looking at is what is the advantage to going to a 65-watt radio versus, say, the 18-watt handheld? I mean, the added power, does that basically help with the transmitting distance?
It does. The transmitting distance is all about the power of the radio. It also goes to the antenna. The 18-watt radio, you could buy an adapter cord where it plugs directly into the cigarette lighter, and you could keep it charged, but the 18-watt radio will die at some point. The thing bouncing around the truck, you know, I've seen more than a few people go in the ditch because they were reaching for their handheld that was either in the passenger seat or it was in the cup holder, or it was someplace where it bounced out of their hand and they couldn't get a hold of it. So, you know, I think a handheld radio is a great first radio to buy. When people call me and say, hey, I just bought a Raptor and I want to go to an event and I need a radio, what should I do? I convince them to get a handheld, an inexpensive handheld first. I've told this story 100 times and it's getting old, but I had some guy go out, he bought a truck, spent 20 grand in modifications and upgrades, spent $700 on a radio that there was absolutely no need to buy because he just wanted the best of the best. And he comes back from the event and he says, hey, will you give me a refund on the radio? I'm like, what's wrong? Did it break? He goes, no. I got to the event, my truck got muddy. And I'm like, what do you mean your truck got muddy? He goes, oh man, this shit's not for me. I don't want to do that. My truck's all dirty, and we got pinstripe when we went down the trail. And I'm like, oh my God. So now I tell people, I give them a little quiz first and ask them before I sell them a $400 radio. So I shouldn't be such a nice guy, but it's just the way I am. So yeah, it's all the power level is the wattage is all about power. It doesn't help you on receiving. You know, a 2-watt radio receives just as well as a 110-watt radio. It all has to do with the person transmitting, how far they are, and their power level.
So pretty much, so power's transmitting, antennas for receiving.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep. Yeah.
Also, real quick, if I could comment about the Amazon radios. I have quite a few of the Amazon radios, actually. I've used them in day camp for the Cub Scouts. I put all my staff on them. Yep. And when I talk about staff, I'm talking about, you know, kids that are anywhere from 15, 16 to 21 years old. I'm not going to hand them a $400 radio. So I don't have a problem handing them a $20 or $40 Bofang off of Amazon. However, I'll tell you what, they're all branded Bofang or there's another name that they put on them.
Poofang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not actually sure they're actually Baofangs. Like they could be knockoffs coming from Amazon. So I'm not going to trust.
Baofangs are a knockoff, so they're all.
So a knockoff of a knockoff, right? So I'm not going to trust my life to something that's that cheaply built, you know?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I look at the Baofeng radios as disposable. If it falls out of my pocket on the trail, it's not the end of the world. I didn't lose. Like, I'm part of a search and rescue team. I have a Motorola 5-watt radio. That's all they give us. That's what the police use is a 5-watt handheld. And it's a $1,800 radio. If I lose it, I got to pay the county back $1,800. So you know where that county radio stays? It stays in the back seat of my truck, and I use my $95 18-watt radio, and it works just as good, if not better. But I don't have to worry about losing that expensive radio.
Awesome. Hey, Eric, did you have some questions for Keith while we have him on the hook?
I think I got them answered. The ones that are listed here are the ones I post on Facebook, so thank you.
Welcome.
Awesome. Now, again, obviously you're the radio sponsor for Raptor Junkies, right? But you do so much more than just radios. I know you've been a big help to myself figuring out some electrical and lighting issues. And I know you've helped out some of the other guys here that I know in the Midwest. So I'd just like to thank you for all your support that you give the Raptor community.
No problem. I enjoy doing it. And you know, if we're not friends on Facebook, please find me on Facebook. Find LVJ Motorsports. I just went out and was off-roading this weekend. And although I've been super busy at my day job, I haven't been able to get out as often as I'd like to. You know, whenever I go out on an event, I'm always inviting people to come along. The more trucks, the merrier.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Keith. Hopefully I get to see you again before Snowball.
Yeah, that's
I'll
right.
definitely see you at Snowball.
That's for sure.
And thanks again for all of your knowledge that you imparted here today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.